Okay, let's just dive right into this one. Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unpack a scientific mystery that actually baffled Albert Einstein himself. And unexpectedly, at least according to our source material, it directly parallels ancient philosophy. For a really long time, we've kind of assumed quantum physics was all about reducing reality to cold, hard, measurable probability, right? Like there was absolutely no room for the ancient or the philosophical. But today, we're exploring an absolutely incredible structural parallel between cutting-edge physics and centuries-old theology. We're looking at the ancient physics behind omnipresence. So we really have to start our investigation way back in 1935. Einstein, along with Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, published what we now call the EPR paper. Now, their goal wasn't to celebrate quantum mechanics. Actually, it was the exact opposite. They wanted to expose what they believed was a totally fatal flaw. See, quantum mechanics was predicting that two particles could become entangled, meaning measuring one instantly determined the state of the other, literally no matter how far apart they were in the universe. Einstein flat out refused to believe this. He actually threw out this famous insult, calling it spooky action at a distance. What Einstein was doing here was defending a principle called local realism. Honestly, this is the absolute bedrock of classical physics. It's the incredibly logical assumption that reality is, well, local. Think about it like this. If you flip a coin in New York and someone else flips a coin in Tokyo, those outcomes are entirely independent. There's no invisible thread connecting them. Things only influence other things through direct contact or through fields that travel at finite speeds. Nothing goes faster than light. So, how did Einstein explain away this whole quantum entanglement problem? He argued for something called hidden variables. He basically said it was like putting a pair of gloves into two separate boxes. If you open your box in New York and find a left glove, well, you instantly know the box in Tokyo holds the right glove. There's no spookiness or instant communication going on there. It's just a predetermined script. But quantum mechanics, it argued something much, much stranger. It said the particles weren't carrying hidden instructions at all. They were actually one undivided system. Okay, moving on to Section 1, Bell destroys local realism. For nearly 30 years, this debate was pretty much just a philosophical stalemate. That is until 1964, when a physicist named John Bell created a mathematical ceiling to actually test this. And over the next 50 years, well, it reads like a multi-decade scientific thriller, as Bell's math was put to the test in laboratories. In '72, John Clauser's first test violated Bell's inequality, but skeptics pointed out some technical loopholes. So in 1982, Alain Aspect used rapid acoustic optical switches, literally changing settings while photons were in mid-flight, which closed a major loophole. Fast forward to 2015 with Ronald Hansen's loophole-free test over 1.3 kilometers. And then finally, Anton Zeilinger's mind-blowing 2018 cosmic Bell test, which actually used the light of distant quasars to determine the settings. The results of all this, they consistently proved Einstein wrong. The universe, for sure, is experimentally non-local. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, if non-locality governs everything, why don't I experience it when I'm just walking down the street? The answer to that is decoherence. Imagine two musicians playing perfectly in sync, creating this beautiful harmony. Now, drop those two musicians into a roaring stadium of 100,000 screaming fans. They're still playing in sync, but you absolutely cannot hear it over the sheer volume of the crowd. That's decoherence. The quantum signal doesn't just vanish in the macroscopic world. It just gets drowned out and completely disguised by the staggering complexity of trillions of interactions. Which brings us to Section 2. Space is not fundamental. If non-locality is woven into the very fabric of our macroscopic world, it kind of forces us to reconsider the most concrete, undeniable fact of everyday human experience. Think about it. What if the three-dimensional space we move through, literally the physical gap between you and the screen you're looking at right now, isn't a fundamental property of reality at all? Prominent theories in physics today are genuinely exploring this. The holographic principle suggests the 3D space we perceive might just be a projection. And since about 2010, some major physicists have even proposed that quantum entanglement actually generates the geometry of spacetime itself. There's this concept called EREPR, which basically suggests entangled particles are connected by microscopic wormholes. So space isn't just an empty container that things sit inside of. Entanglement actually creates the space. So the crucial takeaway here is that distance is an emergent pattern. It's not a fundamental barrier. When you look up at a star that's, say, 4 light years away, in our everyday experience, that gap feels massive and very real. But at the absolute deepest level of quantum reality, that empty space is just a higher level approximation. Down in the underlying pre-geometric layer, no spatial separation actually exists. The universe is a completely connected whole. And that perfectly sets up Section 3, the omnipresence parallel. All right, here's where our explainer uncovers a truly shocking twist. This whole picture of a universe without fundamental spatial separation, it structurally mirrors concepts written over 1,500 years ago. Take a look at this quote from the 4th century. Augustine of Hippo was trying to grapple with the concept of divine presence, and he concluded that it wasn't about a presence being spread out thinly across the universe like a gas. Instead, he wrote that God's mode of existence simply isn't spatial at all. He argued that something divine transcends the categories of location entirely. Fast forward to the 13th century, and we see Thomas Aquinas formalizing this even further. He noted that being everywhere isn't about existing in many different places simultaneously, like a radio signal that just weakens with distance. Rather, it's about being entirely unconstrained by place. As he brilliantly put it, there is no distance in God's mode of being between here and there. Which leads us directly to the ancient definition of omnipresence. For centuries, this idea, being fundamentally unconstrained by spatial distance, where distance is just totally irrelevant, well, it sounded completely physically incoherent, right? I mean, in a Newtonian universe made of absolute rigid space, how could a presence not be diminished by distance? It sounded like pure poetry. But suddenly, the most rigorous mathematical framework physics has ever produced structurally mirrors exactly what these ancient contemplatives described. In quantum physics, distance is an emergent illusion from a fundamentally entangled reality. In ancient theology, omnipresence transcends spatial distance altogether. It turns out the physical universe itself does not obey the rules of strict locality.
Now for Section 4, a structure, not proof.
Now, it's really critical to step back here, keep our scientific objectivity, and understand what this actually means. This explainer is absolutely not claiming that quantum mechanics proves the existence of God, or that ancient monks somehow had mystical access to Bell's theorem. Physics does not make theological arguments. But what it does do, however, is remove that centuries-old scientific assumption that absolute spatial separation is a required feature of reality. It reveals a deep structural resonance. The universe fundamentally acts as a non-local whole. So, the crucial point to take away from all this is that both of these entirely independent modes of inquiry, cutting-edge 21st century theoretical physics on one hand and ancient 4th century theology on the other, they both point to a reality where connection is the absolute default state. Separation? That's what requires work. The parts are secondary. The whole is primary. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. If space itself, literally the very distance between the stars, is just an emergent pattern born from a much deeper entangled reality, what else about our everyday, unquestioned human experience is just waiting to be radically unlearned? Think about that next time you look up at the night sky.